Okay. Okay, so what's your name?
My name is Imran. I work for the Fiji Times.
I'm a dick about the night. What's your name?
My name is Imran. I work for the Fiji Times.
And you are an editor in Fiji Times?
No, I am a senior reporter.
Okay, can you spell your name?
Imran
Imran.
Ali, Ali.
Okay. So let's talk about कहाँ से we should start.
Up to you.
Okay. First of all, do you know what Girmit means? The origin of the word Girmit, how it started?
Well, according to my recollection, Girmit in Fiji is more than 100 years old now. Our great-grandparents came from India to work in the sugarcane plantations. They were brought by the British, and I think it's a name that is synonymous with the Indian diaspora all over the world. No doubt they went through a lot of struggle. They may have passed away, but their legacy remains. And I think Girmit or the work that they did should always be remembered by all of us, no matter where we are in this world. There's been a lot of research done on Girmit in Fiji. I know some very good scholars who, although they live abroad, but they've written some very good books about how they went through this endangered system, or mostly their fathers went through that. But the hard work and whatever they have done has inculcated a sense of belonging. It has made them determined to work harder as their parents or their great parents did. So basically, my recollection of it is that if it was not for the Girmit, we would not have been here in Fiji and elsewhere in the world.
So your great-grandfather was a sugarcane farmer?
Yeah, he was brought from Punjab. My great-grandfather was from Punjab. He came here. He settled after 5 years of indenture system. He settled in Vanuatu in Lambasa, in fact. And from there, my parents or my uncle, they sort of separated. They came here in Vitilevu to work, to look for jobs. At that time it was very difficult to get jobs, and most of them preferred staying in the farms. But I think my dad was lucky. He came over here. He joined the Fiji police force, and he's living in Vitilevu most of the times. But most of my uncles and my grandfather, they all there. They still work the sugarcane plantations, although because of the expiry of leases, the size of land has somewhat become smaller. But they are very much into it. They, apart from sugarcane, they also do rice farming. They also have cows, goats, and all that. So they're very much rural folks.
Okay. So you are not a farmer. How come you are not a sugarcane farmer?
Well, as I said, my dad came after secondary school. He joined the police force. He came here. His uncle sort of enticed him to join the force together, and so he's been in Vitilevu. After his secondary school education, and so I was born in Rekireki, born and brought up there, and then we later moved to Lautoka after he got transferred. So rural life was we were precluded from that. So we very much got ourselves educated in order to in order not to get through the same struggle that our great grandparents or our grandparents did. You know? So for me, I looked at education as a way out of all that, and also at this time, there's the future of the sugar industry is it's very shaky. So I wouldn't myself or my parents wouldn't like to get into that sort of thing. My father did sugarcane farming when he was in secondary school, but after that he got a chance and he moved away. Unlike most of his brothers who are still in the cane belts. You know.
So what were some of the struggles your great-grandfather was dealing with? I mean, what was the hardship, when they were in sugarcane farm?
I think the difficulty that my great-grandparents faced was virtually the same as did everybody else. They had to work long hours, they got pittance in wages. When we hear their tales now, it's very disappointing. Even when the ladies were pregnant, they were forced to work in the sugarcane plantations. So these were some of the daily struggles, and it was really tough. I myself have read a couple of books on the struggles of the indentured laborers, not only in Fiji but in other countries as well, countries like Haiti and other Caribbean countries. And let me say that it's no means feat. It was quite difficult during those days. It's really amazing how they survived. I don't think anybody or the youths of today would be able to go through that same hardship as they did. So to answer your question, yes, the struggles that my great-grandparents or my grandparents faced was virtually the same as did everybody else. The struggles in the sugarcane belt. It was sort of a very difficult sort of struggle at that time, yeah.
So let's talk about independence बात करो ना. Fiji independence was current पे, So when Fiji gained independence from Britain, and how that affect Indo-Fijian and indigenous Fijian relations. So what was Fiji under before Fiji became independent?
Well, basically Fiji was under the British rule, and as you rightly pointed out, in 1970 Fiji gained independence from Britain, and we were then proclaimed a republic. As for the relationship between the two major races, I think it was very healthy at that time, although at this point in time it has somewhat strained a bit, but it can be mended. There were great people at that time. One that I would single out was Ratu Sekam Sesemara, and also the Indian community had very good leaders, people like Jairam Reddy, Siddiq Koya. We had A.D. Patel, and they made sure that the relationship between the two communities were intact for as long as it could. I myself don't have a lot of recollection during for that time, but I could say from what I read or what I've studied so far that there was very healthy debate on political issues. The Indians and Fijians alike were living together like brothers and sisters. I think the relationship now, particularly in the rural areas, is very calm. It's very cordial. It's only at the national level that you find it's a bit shaky. Yeah. So the difference lies
the different lifestyle of the urban Indo-Fijians who came to Fiji as free migrants versus the life of indigenous laborers and the descendants?
Well, as you know, after independence, things started changing, and one of the things was the lifestyle of people. During independence, people were more sort of demarcated in their own communities. They were under somebody's rule. But once they got freedom, the invent of globalization and all that started creeping in, and like all the other communities around the world, I think the lifestyle of not only Indo-Fijians but Fijians in general began changing. You look at the way they talk now, the way their dressing is, the type of food that they eat, it has completely changed. And although we are not up to par in terms of in terms of the way the world is with other countries of the world, but we are slowly moving there, and there's been talk of particularly Fijians losing their culture, their tradition. You'll find some of the Fijians don't even know how to speak their own language. And also in the Indian community, most of them are not able to speak, like what you say, Shubh Hindi. So these things happen, and I think it's going to evolve as we enter into the new era.
Then come to the thing again, because comment for the fish. So what do you think about the different lifestyles?
Well, as you know, when we were under British rule, there was people were living under somebody. They were demarcated in their own communities. But after 1970, people started. As they got more freedom, they started changing their ways, the way they talk, the way they dress, the type of food that they eat, and I think it has. Also the invent of globalization has dawned on our people a lot, and I think it's going to change even further as we go into the new era. You see the Fijians now. Most of them do not even know how to speak their own languages. So the tradition, the culture is somewhat fading away, and also the Indo-Fijians, they're migrating in droves. They visiting places all over the world, and the mindset. The way they used to live before, it's changing. I think it's the trend everywhere in the world. You don't stick to one thing for all the time. You keep changing yourself, and there's this belief that you've got to change yourself with times, and I think that's how it's been followed now.
How is the different standard of living between Indo-Fijians and native Fijians often led to tensions or misunderstanding between two communities?
I can't get you.
How the different standard of living between Indo-Fijians and native Fijians often led to tensions and misunderstanding between two communities?
Well, I think to answer your question, the perception is that Indians are wealthy, they save money unlike Fijians, and so the thinking is that they generally have more money, their standard of living is high. But I don't think that's the case. You'll recall lately the Fiji Human Rights Commission, they released their findings on the affirmative action program of the government. I think there are about 30 programs under that affirmative action program, and in that they specifically pointed out that in fact the vast majority who are poor are rural Indians. So what I'm saying is that if there was any tension between the two major races in terms of living standard, it could be because of this perception that all the Indians are they have big farms, they have businesses, so their standard of living is high than the Fijians. But I don't think it's a problem nowadays, because you see the Fijians are also coming up to par in terms of living standards with any or the other communities that live here.
So what rules, laws and customs change after the independence?
In terms of the Fijian culture, I think it has remained the same. The only thing that has changed is the urban-rural drift. A lot of Fijians have, particularly the youngsters, have seen city life as much better than home. I mean, the life in the villages. And as they come here, the ways, their habits start changing. As for the Indian community, I think it has remained by and far the same as it was during those days. So if you compare both Fijians and Indian culture, I think it's something that is there, but it's not so often practiced as it was during the colonial days, or when we were under the indenture system. People have, like I've said in an earlier question, that people have become more modernized now as compared to when we were 20 or 30 years back. But generally, in terms of culture and tradition, I think nothing much has changed. It's just that people are not practicing it as frequently as they used to.
उसे बात करना जैसे तुम भी है वेलकम के पास अच्छा what kind of future did your parents envision at that time during the independence?
I don't think they had much hope. Those who came here during the indenture system and even after independence, the general understanding or the general inkling was that we are in the sugarcane plantations, their children or our children will have to go through the same fate. In most of the families, those who were determined, those who thought that they could get away with the education, they did. But most of them stayed on the farms, and they are virtually the same as they were, when they were growing up. And as for the future, I don't think our great-grandparents or parents had much hope that we would get this far. And you see among the Indo-Fijian communities, a lot of people have become so successful in life. But if you look at their background, they struggled a lot. Yeah, they themselves wouldn't have thought that they will get this far. But I think even today the only thing that people think about when they raise their family is to have a good education. That's the only way you can get out of hardship or of what our parents went through.
What happened in 1970 after Fiji gained independence? What political organization arose?
इसमें हमें बहुत नहीं हुए हैं.
अच्छा, दूसरा क्वेश्चन है,
if you look at the trend since independence, Ratu Sekam Sesemara's Alliance Party was in dominance up till 1987. After the 87 election, the National Federation and the Labour Party coalition came into power, but their tenure was short-lived after 2 military coups. From then on, there was an interim government up till 1992. Then, for a decade, it was Rambuka's SVT government that was in power, and they ruled for about 7 years up till 99. From 99, Mr. Chaudhry's, there was a change in leadership, a change in people's mindset. They voted for the Labour Party, but again the coup happened, and now, as you know, the SDL is in power. So there's been change. I mean, for certain decades, different political parties have ruled. Alliance, Federation, Labour, and then now SDL. I think which is good for a democracy like Fiji. We need to change from time to time, and you know, it is something that is very healthy for a country like Fiji. The people embrace change. That's something that is admired by the international community as well. If people don't like something, they engineer moves to change it. You know, even if the nationalists or the Fijian people, if they are not happy with the government, as you've seen in 1987, and 2000, they initiated moves to change it. You know, and so I think, but that won't remain the same. I think the party that is in power now, they're destined to lead us for another decade or so, because there is no fallback. There is no other political party. You've seen SVT, they've gone. Labour, well, I can't say much about them. It's been split within. So I think SDL has a good chance of sort of leading this country for another decade and a half.
So how is the economy back then and now? I mean, is the economy doing really good?
I think the economy was doing well after independence, particularly during independence up till the 87 coup. It got worse after the 87 coup. People started migrating, and I think that exacerbated the problem. The biggest challenge for us is to fill the brain drain. You know, the skilled personnel that we've lost over the years. More than 100,000 skilled people have left Fiji since 1987 coups. And when you don't have skilled people here, the productivity goes down, unemployment is rife, poverty is there. So it's all linked, you know. I would say that the turning point was the 87 coup. Had it not been for that, we would have been on par with Australia and New Zealand. So the economy during the 2 decades after the 1970 independence, it was really doing good under Ratumara's government. But after the coup, even though Ratumara came back, but people started losing faith in the economy, and they thought that there was no future for themselves and for their children as well.
So why were all these Indian people leaving Fiji?
Primarily because they did not see a future for themselves here. There is a lot of things behind that, in terms of promotion, in terms of salary increase, in terms of the way they were treated, both by the government and the private sector. I think a lot of people left immediately after the coup, and there was this general perception that we don't have any future here, you know. But that mindset, I think, has started changing dramatically after the swearing in of the multi-party government. People have begun to have faith in the economy now, but I think the damage is done. A lot of people have left, and simply put it could be attributed to low morale, the perception that they don't have any future in here. And I think any Indo-Fijian will understand that emotion, you know.
So what do you think? There's a future in Fiji?
Yes, I'm very optimistic about it. I mean, I don't speak on behalf of my employer. I myself, as an Indo-Fijian, I think there is, if we go or we carry this momentum that we have in terms of the political situation here. You know, there's been a lot of optimism about the multi-party cabinet, and I think it's the beginning of sort of an acceptance by the Fijian community of the Indian community. You know, we were we were not in cabinet for a long time, but it slowly began to change. The Prime Minister has invited the Indo-Fijian MPs into his cabinet, and I think together we can do a lot more than sitting in opposition. And as for me, I think yes, we have a future here. Our children have a future, provided we carry on this momentum and build the trust and the confidence amongst each other.
In the question में answer करे. So what role did Britain play at this point, independent के बाद, after independence?
Well, after independence, the British were mostly an observer into the developments of this country. But I think there is no love lost. Recently we've had Princess Anne visit the country, and you've seen how the government prepared for that, the recognition that they gave to her. And up till now, I mean, even though we are a republic, we attach a great deal of emotion and great deal of importance to the royal family. And at times people say of the civil service, the way it works here, that it automatically comes out that the British were better than them in terms of service delivery or in terms of how things worked out. So I think British played a big role in shaping our nation, and I think the most important thing was they set the groundwork for us to emulate, for us to carry on from here. They've shown us a path, and it's now up to us to follow that and do things the way it should be done.
Do you think British cheated us, our great-great-grandfather, with their pay and stuff like that when they were farmers, or they paid well, even the stallions were involved?
Well, no doubt. I mean, they went through a lot of hardship. They did not receive what they deserved. That's another story. But after that, I think once they completed their 5-year term, I think a lot of opportunities opened up in the civil service and in other organizations for the Indo-Fijians to work in. And you see, there are some around who have come through that system of British rule, and they're very structured, they're very planned, and their work is very different to what people of this era used to do. So the struggle, the difficulty was during that 5-year term. After that, I think we had a good future here,